Welcome to the Fiercely Fueled podcast. I am here today with one of our Fiercely Fueled coaches, Pia Marangoni, who is an IPF lifter out of South Africa. Pia has recently joined the Fiercely Fueled team, but as a coach, but has been part of the Fiercely Fueled team as a client for years. So I'm super pumped. Welcome.
Hi, Kristen. Thank you so much. I'm also super pumped to be here. I mean, I can't actually believe this is happening. So, yeah, so exciting.
Tell us a little bit about you.
I am a powerlifter. I've been lifting for, I think this is my 6th year. So it's 5 years competitively. And I guess like so many of the clients that I've met through Fiercely Fueled was really battling with dialing in on my nutrition and understanding how the things that I was doing on a daily basis were affecting my lifting. So when I started to get really serious about lifting and wanting to look for any little opportunity to kind of increase my total, the last place that I thought to look was my nutrition and my health habits. And anyway, that's how I ended up here. And as you say, I've been a client for a couple of years and it's been phenomenal. As you know, you've been on this journey with me. And, you know, the interesting thing is I've learned that there are so many things that affect my lifting that I wouldn't immediately say affect my lifting. And these things aren't necessarily specific to lifters, they're specifically to everyone. So it's things like, obviously, I mean, we all know we need to eat our veggies. We know that. We know we need to drink our water. But things like getting more sleep, getting better quality of sleep, practicing mindfulness, things that are making me a better, healthier, more productive person are in turn having a huge impact on my lifting. So yeah, I mean, I got more than I bargained for and I'm very happy about it. But I might have said a bit too much as well.
That's awesome, because that's exactly what we wanted to talk about today was, like, first of all, what does it mean? What does it mean to be healthy? Whether we're looking at nutrition, because there's a lot of confusion about like what is a healthy diet like, and then how does that translate to being a healthy person and a healthy athlete and a productive person? And all of those things play off of each other, which is something that we really work with our athletes and all of our clients, whether they consider themselves an athlete or not, right? Like, we have talked about how we work with clients who certainly would not consider themselves an athlete in any stretch of the imagination, but the things that they need to work on and dial in, we can apply what we have applied for ourselves and the athletes that we have worked with, apply that to someone who just needs to be really productive in their life. And we get that same output, right? We get that same increase in their health and their productivity and their mental capacity and their mental focus, just like we do when we dial in for our training.
You know, the principles are the same. I think for everyone, whether you're competing to be, to run a big organization, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're an athlete, the principles that affect us all are the same. We all need to eat better. We all need vegetables. We all need to drink water. We all need to sleep. And I think it's just dialing it in slightly differently for whoever, for wherever that person is and whatever they're trying to achieve. But we all, to a lesser or greater degree, need all of these things, which impact our overall, our deep health and functioning as a human being.
Yes, 100%. So let's start with talking about nutrition and what is healthy nutrition, because I think that obviously that we are nutrition coaches, but we are so much more than nutrition coaches. And we're going to get into that. Really, I look at us as almost lifestyle coaches or health coaches, because nutrition is just the tip of the iceberg with people. But let's talk a little bit about healthy nutrition, because so many times people think they have to make these radical changes when they are going to make health changes. Whether you're a competitive lifter or you're just someone who has really, really big aspirations in your career, a lot of times people go, okay, I want to improve my health. I'm going to completely cut out a food group. I'm going to go keto. I'm going to cut out carbs, or I'm going to cut out all sugar. And they start with these really, really radical changes. And a lot of times that's not what's necessary, right? We're on this continuum of health, and we just need to move the needle a little bit. And a lot of times we can kind of grab the low-hanging fruits. So what I look at, I say, okay, if someone, we can kind of think of it as a hierarchy, but first of all, is someone eating enough? Are they eating too much? And what does the food that they eat consist of? Are they cooking meals at home, or are they eating out for every meal? If they're eating out for every meal, what percentage of that is coming from fast food? We can start to make changes from there, as opposed to just radically changing everything and just saying, I'm only going to eat salads and chicken, right?
Yes. I mean, and I think you've nailed it. It's I love to tell this. My husband doesn't love this very much, but he came home. He went to see someone, and he came home with a diet with a whole bunch of foods that like we never eat. And I mean, nothing good or bad. It's just stuff that we don't eat, like fat-free, sugar-free peanut butter and fat-free cottage cheese, and a whole nothing wrong with the foods, but it's just stuff that we don't like, and it wasn't in our diet, and and a whole lot of like healthy, in inverted commas, things that like just sat in our pantry, and we both now felt that we'd failed at now this diet. And I think that's exactly what happens, is people feel they need to make radical changes. They feel they need to change everything all at once. And then they are unable to, or it's not something that they like, or it's not livable or doable or sustainable, and then they don't, and then they feel like they're failing. So the approach of doing what you're doing just a little bit better. I mean, nobody starts deadlifting a world record. I mean, I don't know anyone who does that. We all start in well, I mean, maybe you don't start in but maybe you do start in the bar, and you just build that up. And you build the foundation, like you were saying, there's a hierarchy of things that you can dial in, and you can make things just a little bit better. Are you eating out 5 times a week? Could you eat out 4, maybe? Could you cook at home once? Could you cook at home twice? Could you add a little bit more vegetables to your meal than you're currently eating? Could you have an extra glass of water when you have your dinner? So my favorite quote at the moment is a quote that I think I heard David Goggins say, is that you can fill a cup from a dripping tap. And that is so powerful for me, because it's these tiny changes. They don't have to be radical. Sometimes they're so tiny you don't even feel them. But to your point, lower hanging fruits. And when you start doing these tiny things, it starts making a really big difference. And these tiny things start adding up and gaining momentum. And that's where we start seeing really, really powerful traction. So, do you love peanut butter? I'm not going to tell you to stop eating peanut butter, but maybe you can have a tiny bit less, or be careful about when you have it, or, whatever. So, yeah, progressive overload from nutrition.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. We're going to start where you're at, and we're going to start to make simple changes from there. And too often, we let the perfect be the enemy of the good, right? We try to go so far overboard with what our perception of health is, that we forget that health really truly is about balance, right? So
Yes,
we
yes.
want to make sure that we're getting enough protein. We want to make sure that we're eating a lot of fruits and vegetables. We want to make sure that we're packing our carbohydrates in our day appropriately for the training that we're going to be getting in. Like, we want all of those things to be right. But if you're not there with it, right? Like if you're not even sure how to meet your protein needs, then dialing in some of these other things maybe don't matter. If your diet consists mostly of processed foods, maybe we need to start with like, hey, let's figure out how we can just simply add to that. Let's simply add vegetables to your processed food diet and slowly start to make changes from there.
Yes. And I love that, because I think it's a big mindset shift in terms of enhancing or adding versus driving a deficit or a deprivation mindset. And the moment you tell us when I tell you not to think of a pink elephant, that's exactly what you're doing right now. So the moment I tell you can't have something, that's when you want it. So the process of enhancing, improving, I think is very powerful, and it's much more sustainable, I think. And people are much more likely to embrace changes and make this part of their daily routine and make it livable if they're adding as opposed to depriving.
Yes, absolutely. So an example, I have a test client right now that's a friend of mine who is an entrepreneur, and it just doesn't work out, but was like, hey, the things that you talk about doing with your athletes are actually things that I need help with. I need to plan and structure my day in such a way where I can get the most output from my work, right? He works really crazy hours. He's really overextended. And because of that, his health has really suffered. And so I was like, okay, let's test this out. I'm going to take all of these things that I am used to applying to athletes, and let's see how we can apply them to someone who's not an athlete, but still needs proper sleep. So these are the things that we work on with our athletes, right? We work on dialing in sleep and stress management and energy levels, mood, productivity, all of these things we work on with our athletes, because if they don't have those in line, they're not going to be successful in the gym, and their nutrition is going to suffer if they haven't planned and prepared properly. So this is what we're working on with this friend of mine. And literally the changes that we're making with him are just, okay, you're going to eat breakfast every day, because he doesn't really do that. He eats out a lot because he's on the go all day long. So we're, and I asked him, I said, is it realistic for you to be able to pack a lunch and bring that with you? And he was like, no, I'm just telling you right now, that's not going to happen. So, okay, cool. So for me to set him up on macros and say, you're going to eat this many macros a day, and I expect you to pack your lunch and bring it, he's going to fail. He's 100% going to fail. It's not realistic for him.
Exactly.
But simply getting him to eat breakfast, having him learn how to pick out a meal that's going to be a little bit more healthy at a restaurant, that's going to help him feel better. And then he actually really loves to cook. He just doesn't do it a lot. So having him plan and prepare and grocery shop for 3 dinners a week, and then go on, he's going to go on either a 3-mile walk or a 3-mile bike ride around his subdivision 3 times a week. That's it. That's where we're starting. And I can guarantee his sleep is going to be improved. His mental focus is going to be improved at work. We're just simply dialing in all these things that we dial in with athletes, but in a way that's just going to improve, because he is like an athlete. He's just not using his body. He's using his mind.
Yeah. And I think it's also an important concept, is that you don't need to be a competitive athlete to focus on improving your health. And you also don't need to do what people think competitive athletes do in order to be healthy. healthy in inverted commas. And you know, and what is health? Health is balance, and oftentimes what you think is really healthy is probably really extreme, right? If was my perception of oh, you know, like, you know, I used to think, and not to say people who look like this aren't healthy, but you know that you a marker of health is having you need to be shredded, and you need to have abs, and you need to be jacked, and you need to have veins popping everywhere. And some people do walk around like that, but not everybody does, and not everybody has the genetics to do that. And if people put their body into that state, it takes them a lot to get there, and that's not a place you can live at for a very long time. So that is a lot of, you know, I think I'm digressing a little bit, but that's what I used to think was healthy. I used to think having, you know, you needed to eat green vegetables and white fish and chicken to be healthy. Nothing wrong with that, but it's not the only definition of health. If you had told me, oh, if you want to be healthier, you need to sleep another 2 hours, I would have gone, what? You know, I never considered actually sleep as a really important lever to improve my health. But to circle back to nutrition is, and to Joe's point, I mean, I remember, and I think I even said it to you in one of our check-ins, is my brain feels so clear because all of a sudden I was eating enough protein, I was eating enough carbohydrates to recover, I wasn't feeling depleted, and I was actually feeling awake in the middle of the day and crushing my training sessions. So when you're nourished and you're recovering from whatever your stress is in life, and that stress could be the boardroom, it could be the arena, it could be the platform, doesn't matter, stress is stress. But when you're recovering from that and you're nourishing your body to fuel that stress and that recovery, you actually feel like an entirely different person. And I didn't know how that felt until I felt it, because I'd never nourished my body properly until I met you. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. So many people are used to feeling beaten down by their training, and it's a struggle, right? It becomes this struggle where they're beaten down by training. They're losing mental focus and work. Everything becomes about just trying to hang in and like white knuckle it through their training, right?
Yes.
And it doesn't have to be that way. Yeah. It doesn't have to be that way, and it shouldn't actually be that way. And how many people have we worked with that are like, oh wow, actually I feel really good. Training is going really good. I don't feel beat up anymore, and I'm productive in my life outside of training. I have more energy to spend on time with my kids or my spouse or social life. When we dial those things in and nourish the body and focus on recovery as well, it's amazing the changes that happen across the board in people's lives. And so while it is about nutrition, it's about so much more than nutrition.
I think we should, it is. I mean, but I always kind of think we should be called recovery coaches because we're really coaching recovery. And nutrition is it's a huge part of recovery. It's an enormous part of recovery, but all the other things that we look at in relation to performance and training, it is about how well you're recovering from your training stress and your life stress. And back to your our test client that we were talking about, is the only difference between him and a powerlifter or a weightlifter is the stress that he's experiencing is different, and his arena of performance is a potentially different arena. But he's got to still deal with all the other stuff that we have to deal with, kids and family and life and traffic jams, and life is messy. And this is the other thing, is if you don't have a plan that is livable, doable, easy, sustainable, if we don't equip you with the skills to set yourself up for success, whatever that is for you in your context in your life, you're going to fall over. So, for this client, I think a huge win is having a fridge full of food he can prepare once a week. That's a huge win. And that is a big behavior shift that nobody, that actually takes some coaching and some change management, if you want to call it that, because this is a deviation from what he's used to doing. But eventually that will become habit. And once we've addressed and coached and that habit has set in, you can look for the next best opportunity, if you want to call it that.
Yes, exactly. So one of the things that has become the staple of our coaching and that I'm applying in this new arena with this test client is saying, okay, we're, like I said earlier, we're grabbing that low hanging fruit. We're going to say what things are going to make the biggest impact, and we're going to work on those, and we're going to get as far as we can possibly go with those until those are no longer really, we have to get to the next step because we've made as much impact as we're going to make with those things. Mm-hmm. Now let's bring in another layer. And so for some people, that means that we get huge return on investment with simple changes. And we can go that way for a long time before we even need to add in more complex layers. Because simply just, as you said, you didn't consider sleep being part of health. When you were looking at athletes that you felt were the marker of health, you didn't even consider what their sleep habits might be. And so many people don't. So when we start looking at those things and everything starts adding up. If you get someone who's sleeping 6 hours a night and you get them sleeping 7 to 7.5 hours a night, suddenly their recovery is better. Suddenly, and research supports this, that when you're sleep deprived, you're going to make poorer food choices and you're going to have less decision-making skills. So we run out of, I call it decision fatigue that we run into, where we're like, I can't make another decision about what I'm going to eat. And so I'm just going to eat potato chips because that's what's in my pantry. So when we're sleeping more, those things become easier. When we get someone planning and preparing their meals for the day, a day in advance or a week in advance or just a couple of days in advance, then everything starts to get easier. Their stress levels decline. They can apply that energy to something else in their life. And so the simple changes can really add up. And once you get somebody recovering a little bit better, now that's going to have huge return on investment in the gym. So they're going to be able to push a little bit harder in their training. Or maybe for someone who really isn't even working out that much, they're like, I feel really good. I'm going to start trying to get in a couple of workouts a week. And that's a huge game changer. Everything starts to compound on itself there.
And exactly the moment, momentum is contagious. The moment you start making these tiny little changes, it grows and it snowballs. I just wanted to touch on one point that you said is that it's simple. And I used to think I was really missing something radical. And I used to think there was, what does everybody else know that I don't know?
Like a secret. Really you thought simple. There was a secret.
I really did. And the trick is it's so deceptively simple. We don't believe it. These things that we've spoken about, it's really that simple. But simple is not easy. And this is what I had to get my head around. It's, eat your protein every day. Okay, simple task. Easy to execute, maybe not so much, So it's also about taking these simple concepts and helping people understand how we can execute in our daily lives. For some people and many people, you tell them how much protein they're eating and they don't believe you. They're like, there's no way I can eat that much protein. Like, what must I just eat chicken? Simple is not easy, but doing something as simple as making sure you have a good quality protein source with every meal can be a game changer. And it can start spiraling into these other changes that you were talking about, So the moment you dial in one thing and you're like, yes, I'm winning, I'm having breakfast, then it becomes a lot easier to do things.
Yes.
So, yeah.
I recently heard I recently heard the term small hinges that swing big doors. So that's what we try to
Yes.
go for, is
Yes.
these
I love
small
that.
things that have a really big impact. But as you said, it takes practice to implement, right? And that's where I feel like a coach really comes in. Like, how do I actually make these habit changes? And I have this conversation with so many of our clients that, look, this sounds difficult to you right now. And every time our body wants homeostasis, our body does not want to change, our minds do not want to change. And that's often the biggest hurdle, is just simply seeing that it's possible, that you can do it. And while it's not a habit right now, eventually you're going to get to a point where this is such an ingrained habit that you don't even have to think about it. But in the beginning, that's really difficult. So like your example with protein, that can be very difficult for someone in the beginning. And then when they have a really stressful week, they're like, oh, shoot, I only ate like a quarter of the amount of protein that I was supposed to eat. And they're bummed out about it. I'm like, wait, hold up. Because you fell back onto some old habits, but that's part of the process. It's okay. Let's continue to move forward. And when they're discouraged, I remind them that at some point, if they could just continue trying to be consistent, right? Not perfect. If they just continue trying to do this, that eventually when they have a bad day or a bad week, it's going to look even better than their best week right now, because they're laying the foundation and the groundwork for these simple habits that can be difficult to implement, but are possible.
And I like the point that you made, is that you can't mess this up. So if you didn't hit your protein for a day, you're not going to go to prison. You know, you can't mess it up. It happens, you know, and I think we've got to give ourselves permission to be less than perfect. I mean, of course we want to try and be as consistent as we can day in and day out, but not to beat yourself up about it if it doesn't happen on that day, because life happens, right? You might work late at work. That's okay. The point is we navigate these things. It's like we've got to surf that wave instead of letting it drown us. And the more you build the habits, the more these things become supporting elements in your life and not things that crush you. So it can also create a solid foundation for you to deal with things that kind of go crazy. You know, but you've got a solid fund. Like I found it for me. It's like, well, I'm really well grounded now. It took me a couple of years. That if I don't get to eat at lunchtime, which would make me really angry, it's okay. I can handle it. I know what to do. We can evolve and we can adjust from there. So
yes, yeah. And once you have that groundwork, that foundation, when things come up that throw you out of your schedule, you know what to do. You, just like you said, you know what changes you need to make. You know how to make adjustments on the fly. And that's really difficult in the beginning when you're learning, but you get to this point where it's just, everything is just simple guidelines, right? And you're like, oh, well, if this happens, then I just do this. And we all have areas of our life where we do that automatically. And we just need to draw our confidence from those areas of our life. So for me, training and nutrition is the glue that holds my entire life together. And right now, I'm taking my mindset with those things and applying them to other areas of my life that are hard or difficult. And that's the thing that I've always loved about lifting, is that I learned so many lessons, so many life lessons that I can apply. Right. And I think all of us that have fallen in love with lifting, that's part of part of it. It's like, oh, wow. Okay. Just stand up, right? With a squat. It's all you got to do is just stand up with
Easy,
the weight.
right?
And that's
simple.
right.
Simple.
And that's what we have to do in our lives a lot of time is like, just stand up. And so that glue that holds things together, once you have those things dialed in, everything else just becomes easier. Right now, I'm under a lot of work and just time stress. I've got to have my time management on point right now. I just have a ton on my plate. And instead of that completely messing up my training, which I was a little concerned it might, but I said, that's okay if it messes up my training. We're just going to do our best. I use auto regulation in training now, which is one reason I switched from percentage-based training to RPE-based training, was because I knew I was going to have a lot of stress and a lot on my plate. And I knew I needed to just be able to have my training fit with how I was feeling on the day. A beautiful thing has happened though, because of these habits that I have spent years putting together. When my time management is on point and my nutrition is on point, guess what's happening in the gym? I'm PRing again because everything is so dialed in. And that wasn't even the point. I was prepared to not PR and just put in some work. But everything is so dialed in. So I think that's the beauty of looking at things from a broad perspective instead of a very narrow perspective, grabbing that low-hanging fruit, grabbing those things that we know are going to make the biggest difference. And I will point out that the things that make the biggest difference for someone is different from person to person.
Yes,
for one person,
yes.
It might be sleep. For another person, it might be stress management. For another person, it might be certain aspects of their nutrition or their timing around their meals. And it all stems from where are they at right now.
Exactly. And I think the approach of being adaptive is also, I draw so many parallels to adjusting nutrition and my nutrition approach through these hard-earned lessons that I've learned through powerlifting is that it's really about doing what you can on the day. And some days you will crush it 100%. Some days you may not. But if you show up and you give what you've got on the day, it will add up over time. And to your point, show up every day, do what you can. And that consistency is what's going to drive the results that you're looking for. And it's simple. But that's what
100%. Yes.
Yeah.
100%. I couldn't have said that any better, Pia. That was amazing. So with that, I think that concludes this episode. That was perfect. If you like the show, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to my free email newsletter at guide.fiercelyfueled.com/podcast. In addition to updates, articles, and behind-the-scenes tips from my team and I, my email newsletter subscribers also get my pre- and post-training meals guide to help you position yourself to get stronger faster than you ever thought possible. You can get it all for free at guide.fiercelyfueled.com/podcast. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at Fiercely Fueled Nutrition. And lastly, this show is meant to make the strength world a better, stronger, and healthier place. Please share it with your friends and subscribe to the show.